Good morning and welcome back to Livestrong's Innovation Conversations Summit 2020. If you are just joining us, if this is your first session with us, you have chosen a good one to start. In fact, if you registered for this session before October the 8th, then a signed copy of Andy Andrews' book, The Little Things, right here, is in the mail and on the way to you. Hopefully no delays, so be sure to check your mailboxes soon for that. Andy is not just an author. He is a professional noticer. He has this uncanny ability to see the actions and impact that little things have that other people just seem to miss. Andy is with us today to get us thinking about all of those little things. Andy, thank you so much for being here, and the gallery is all yours.
All right. Thank you, Suzanne. I appreciate it. I'm honored to be here with you guys today. It is kind of odd that somebody would create a career out of noticing little things, but that's really kind of what I've done. It's been my gift ever since I was a little kid. I would just see the things that other people missed. It's probably why my parents thought I was like an odd little child, but I would see parallel thinking, and that's what I do with clients. It's what I do now as I work with people like Livestrong, and so there's often one of the things that I've noticed, and that's the name of my podcast, by the way, The Professional Noticer, and where we do observations and answers. But it's like the odd misconception about things that are very powerful is often very strong, and little things are no different, because there is an overwhelming feeling in society, I suppose, that began maybe with the book that it sold 11 million copies, and it was called Don't Sweat the Small Stuff. And, it is obvious that it sounds good, but don't sweat the small stuff? You'd better. And the reason is because everything that is big in your life is made up of small stuff. You can go in the Louvre and see the Mona Lisa. And so many centuries ago, when this was being painted, Da Vinci made it with the smallest paintbrush that was available at the time. And other people were like, making fun of him and saying, "Man, you're taking forever with this. What is going on?" And he said, "I'm creating a masterpiece." Now, he did. And if you look at it today, even after centuries of time, with a magnifying glass, little brush strokes cannot be discerned. It is almost photographic in its reality. And so here he was creating a masterpiece, but it's important to remember that it was individual brush strokes that created that masterpiece. And we consider it a masterpiece. It took a long time, but it was individual. And so whether you're creating with your life, whether you're creating a masterpiece or a disaster, it's important to remember that it will be done one brush stroke at a time. No matter how much you pay attention or ignore, your life is made of little bitty things. And so as we move on here, as we get into this, let's begin with the story of a disaster. Okay, or at least a story that seemed to be a disaster. It was in 2600 BC, actually just like 2696 BC. And the Emperor of China, Lei had this real problem. Something was destroying the royal mulberry trees. So he did what any brilliant man does when faced with a problem that he can't handle. He turned it over to his wife. And so when Empress Sailing Shi looked at the trees, she noticed a moth laying eggs on the mulberry leaves. Eggs that within a few days hatched into thousands of caterpillars. And after another few days, each of these caterpillars spun a thread that it wrapped itself inside and it formed this cocoon. Now, the royal gardeners declared the mulberry trees a total loss because they were infested. Okay, as her tea was being served one afternoon, however, the empress picked up one of the cocoons from the leaves and was examining it and pulled a little piece of this cocoon off and accidentally dropped the cocoon into her hot water that was making her tea. And so slowly this delicate thread that had formed the cocoon began to unwind. And as she stretched the thread from her hand to her hand and then back and forth across the table, it occurred to her that maybe this thread could be woven into cloth. It was at that moment that the silk trade was born. And so this previously unknown cloth of extraordinary beauty and a brand new source of astonishing wealth began with a kingdom's disaster. And somebody paying attention to something that was so tiny, though it had been seen before, it had never been seen with those eyes. Okay, sometimes it's difficult to envision a positive outcome when we're in the middle of a mess. You know, we look at the landscape surrounding us and we believe our lives are in ruins and we feel helpless. We don't even know where to begin to make things right. How could we imagine, and how could the emperor have ever imagined that unfathomable beauty and uncountable riches could possibly rise from the situation that seemed to signal his destruction? I mean, so most of us know that our thinking, how we think, determines our choices. But have you ever considered the fact that you can choose how you think? You know, purposely choosing one's thoughts is the key to leaving the uncontrollable reality most people accept and instead moving into a life of measurable results that most people can't imagine. You know, I am right now in Orange Beach, Alabama. We got hit by Hurricane Sally 3 or 4 weeks ago. And it is interesting to look at the situation with perspective now, because you hear people going, oh, this is the worst thing that could have happened for everybody. And you realize, well, not everybody. You know, the Home Depot and Lowe's are doing really well. The hardware stores doing really well. Roofers, they're going to make more money in the next 3 or 4 years than they ever thought they were going to make in their entire lives. Landscape people, it's just like unbelievable. You know, dock builders, people who build docks, it's like heyday. Boats, people are having to buy. It's just unbelievable. But while something may be tough for some people, other people are seeing it different. I'm sure you've heard the word perspective, okay? But have you ever considered or examined the power of it? This is such a tiny thing, the way you think. Over the years, I've learned more and been more consistently excited about the power of perspective than about any other principle that I've attempted to understand. It's such a little thing that people mostly don't pay attention to it, because I'm always learning about perspective. An explanation of perspective seems to end up somewhere in every book I write. This is true whether the form it takes is a discussion between characters in one of my novels. I just finished a book called Just Jones, and it just came out. And one of the old man characters in there, who is the noticer, you know, he discusses this with one of the other characters. And so whether it's an examination of that or an examination of facts, all right, in a nonfiction book like we're about to do here, perspective can seem an odd concept, right? At the very least, it's a curious one. And most people, if asked for a definition of perspective, would tell us that it's how someone sees something, like seeing a glass half empty or half full. And actually, that's only half right. Here's what I mean. Your perspective is yours. You own it. No one can change it but you. You have been created with free will. You decide how you will see things. Therefore, your perspective is how you choose to see things. The glass, by the way, is neither half empty or half full. It just is. But by choosing how you see this situation or any situation, you're choosing how others relate to you, whether or not they'll follow your leadership, if they'll continue in a relationship with you or not, and a host of other things. This is why perspective is the only thing that can totally change results without changing any of the facts. While others choose to see a situation as the end of the road, and they move in a direction that makes that so, your perspective can be that this is the beginning of a whole new road, and move in a totally opposite direction where things become better than you'd ever imagined. Others may decide this is the worst thing that could have possibly happened. And of course, you're free to believe that as well, but you're also free to choose a different perspective. Is it the worst thing that could have happened? Or is it the best thing that could have happened? Your perspective will determine what you do at this point. Therefore, if you sit down and collapse and complain and do nothing, your perspective was right on target. It really was the worst thing that could have happened. On the other hand, you can get up, shake it off, and smile. You can learn lessons, change gears, be grateful for the opportunity to know for sure what does not work. You can use extra time to read, to pray, to be quiet and think. Then you can allow all the new understanding you've gained to coalesce into plans of certainty for an astonishing future you would have otherwise never known. At that point, you will realize that your perspective was right on target. It really was the best thing that could have happened. Perspective can be more important than answers. In a time of crisis, most people are so desperate for an answer that they'll shove one into the situation without proper regard for its timing or value. As you navigate your life, be on guard for the gap between what will work and what is the best. See, choices and decisions made by intelligent people, no matter when they're made, most always gain a result that works in some way or to some degree. The best answers to a situation, however, often contain an element of timing. In addition, I would urge that you notice how often intelligent people assemble facts and then make their decisions based upon those facts. Actually, it's what most people do because it produces results that work, at least in some way and to some degree. So contrast that method with how wise people deal with the same types of situations. You'll quickly notice a little thing that is huge, and that is that they also assemble the current information. But instead of making a decision based solely on the facts, wise people first apply a healthy dose of perspective to the facts. That perspective allows them to choose the best course of action and set everything in motion at the very best time. Perspective about a situation creates calm. Calm leads to clear thinking. Clear thinking yields ideas and discerns the difference between problem areas and opportunities. Clear thinking pinpoints perfect timing. In turn, all of this leads to the answer that you can be confident is the best that can be employed. Perspective is such a little thing, but it's the only thing that can dramatically change the results without changing any of the facts. So, here's a question about a little thing that most people never even discern. And I really believe that the quality of your answers will be determined by the quality of your questions. You want good answers in your life? Ask good questions. You want imaginative answers? Ask imaginative questions. Here's an imaginative question. Does a mind have wings? And the answer is yes, but only if we choose a proper perspective. Without a proper perspective, a mind doesn't necessarily have wings, it has an anchor. So that is especially true when we're choosing the perspective with which we view what is possible in our own lives. Are you familiar with the word Beemanesque? It's an actual word that is included in several dictionaries. And that word is, and I guess that the word is not in all dictionaries is because until October 18th, 1968, there wouldn't have been a reason to add esque to the name Beeman. But on that date, there was a young man named Bob Beeman who was verging on immortality in the world of track and field. Not that anybody suspected it. I mean, the results he was posting were excellent, though not really excellent enough to suspect the greatness that was to come. He was originally from Queens, New York, and he competed in only one event, the long jump. You know, that's the one where they run down, the legs are bicycling up in the air, and then finally land, right? So Beeman was headed to the Olympic Games in Mexico City. And he was considered, you know, a possible medal contender, possible. Unfortunately, the 2 days of competition for which he had physically prepared his entire life did not begin well. He jumped poorly both days, was close to elimination in the preliminaries. Beeman almost missed the finals completely, didn't qualify until his third and last attempt. In the finals with Beeman on that second day, were the two previous long jump gold medalists. It was an American, Ralph Boston from Laurel, Mississippi, who had won the event in 1960, and a guy named Lynn Davies from Great Britain was the winner in 1964. So rounding out this field of four competitors was Igor Terovasin from the Soviet Olympic team. And twice he had won the Olympic bronze medal. At these Olympics, however, it was Terovasin who came into Mexico City as the favorite to win the gold because he was the current holder of the world record in the long jump. Now, a year earlier at an international meet held in this same Mexico City stadium, he had set the record against the same three guys, Boston, Davies, and Beeman. The same three guys he was now facing on the world's biggest stage, the finals of the Olympic Games. In a century of competition prior to those 1968 Olympics, the world record in long jump in a century had been broken only 13 times. The increase when the record was broken averaged only 2.5 inches. On the day of the Olympic finals, the world record still stood where the Soviet had placed it the year before, 27 feet, 4 3/4 inches. So Davies of Great Britain led out. He was followed by Boston, the American, from Laurel, Mississippi. Then Terovasin, the first three competitors' attempts landed each of them just shy of the 27-foot mark. Having done what they could, the three turned to watch the young American. On an impulse, however, Ralph Boston moved quickly to Beeman's side. Now you can see this on some of these old films. So here's Boston, you know, former gold medalist, moving over to this kid. He considered himself a mentor to this younger athlete. And Boston spoke directly into Beeman's left ear. Years passed before either man described the momentary one-sided conversation. But in that instant, Bob Beeman was transformed by an almost supernatural focus he had never before experienced. Later, he would talk about that moment and the words of his friend. Physically, Beeman said, I was as close to perfect as I ever got. Mentally, and I didn't know this, of course, I was not nearly so strong, but as I stood there, about to approach the track for my jump, Ralph spoke to me and his words took shape in my head. So in essence, Ralph Boston's words became Bob Beeman's perspective about himself. Archival footage, you can see it on YouTube, of these seconds reveal the stoic Bob Beeman staring straight ahead as Ralph Boston urgently spoke to him. And quickly the older athlete whispered this. This is what he said. He said, "Take off early. You have room to spare." See, Beeman had already fouled on his first two attempts. He only had one chance left. And so Boston said, "Take off early. You have room to spare. Give him 2 inches on the front. You'll take 2 feet when you land. Your legs have never been as strong as they are right now. At this moment, your body weighs nothing. Your mind has wings. Use them. Fly up, fly out." And then Boston backed away, and Beeman moved into position. For 20 seconds, he stared down the track. Then he rocked back only one time. He shot forward with his head up, his arms pumping like pistons. And astonishingly, it took only 6 seconds for Beeman to take 19 hard strides, leap up in the air. They measured later, his height was over 6 feet into the air, his legs continuing to wheel forward in that bicycling motion, and land in the sand pit at the end of the track. But there was a problem. The issue was not with Beeman's takeoff. That's the most likely foul for long jumpers who often overstep that starting board. He also landed cleanly inside the boundaries of the sand pit. The problem was where Bob Beeman had landed in the sand pit, because the optical device that had been installed, it had been installed by the International Olympic Committee to measure the distances. It didn't work. It failed to measure his leap because Bob Beeman had jumped over and well beyond it. For almost 20 minutes, the entire stadium watched, waiting impatiently as the Olympic judges had to locate an old-fashioned tape measure in order to make this official ruling about what had occurred. And when the distance was finally posted, there was a stunned silence on the field and in the stadium. Within seconds, Beeman fell to his knees, his face in his hands, and there began a roar from the crowd that literally shook the building. Bob Beeman had jumped 29 feet, 2.5 inches, almost 2 feet beyond what any person had ever done. Beeman didn't simply set a record, he shattered it. And that Olympic record still stands today. And most agree with the assessment made on the spot by Lynn Davies, the defending Olympic gold medalist. The guy said, "Bob, you have destroyed this event." It was the jump. That's how it came to be known. It was named by Sports Illustrated as one of the 5 greatest sports moments of the 20th century. ESPN named it the most amazing Olympic performance in history. And as you already know, that one jump by this young man from New York so stunned the world that it created its own word. And Beemanesque is now in dictionaries around the world. It's an adjective meaning a result so far superior to anything accomplished before, it is overwhelming. Now, let's close this up. It's interesting that Bob Beeman never again matched the results of that legendary jump. It had captivated the world, and several times, as time passed, several more times, not only was he competing all over the world, he returned to Mexico City, same place. He competed against the same 3 guys in Mexico City. He competed at the same wind speed, at the same temperature, the same time of day. But he never did it again. Now, it is also curious that during this time, the press all over the world, they kept saying in their articles, they kept saying, "Can Beeman do it again?" You know, we talked about questions, and bad answers. Can Beeman do it again is a bad question. Because the first time he did not do it again, the answers that they started giving each other were, no, he cannot do it again. He cannot do it again. Can he do it again? No, he can't. And unfortunately, Beeman, this seems like such a tiny little thing, but Bob Beeman listened to that. He listened to everybody's conclusions about, that can he do it again? No, he can't. And he never did. Bad question, bad answer. Now, see, if the question had been, will Beeman do it again? Then no would have been an acceptable answer. But can Beeman do it again? Well, that answer should have been yes. Can Beeman do it again? Absolutely, yes. How do we know that? Because he already did. He already did. So can he do it again? Yeah. Will he do it again? I mean, who knows? Okay, but he decided that he could not. Does a mind have wings? Absolutely. Unfortunately, a mind also possesses an anchor, and either can be deployed at the drop of a thought. A mind with wings fully extended creates a flurry of appropriate action, leading to positive results. These results are identifiable, often described as momentum. On the other hand, when a mind folds its wings and lowers its anchor, the diminishing results that occur are also identifiable and often described as a loss of momentum. Is momentum important? Yeah. If you're an athlete, yeah. If you're in business, yes. If you intend to steer your family and friends and you want to have any kind of influence, yeah. And so when you look at the effects of momentum, they're easy to predict if one understands what its power actually does for a person. And incidentally, what momentum does for a person is exactly what it does for a team, a family, an organization, or a business. When one has momentum, the results of any action are greater than reality says they should be. And conversely, when one lacks momentum, the results of any action is less than reality says they should be. In other words, with momentum, you look better than you really are. Without momentum, you look worse than you really are. Is it possible that Bob Beeman actually lost momentum quickly after pulling off what's still considered the most stunning performance in track and field history? Yeah, it's not only possible, it's exactly what happened. But how did it happen? Well, it's that horrible question. And it's what he thought. It was his perspective about himself. Because when the question was asked, can Bob Beeman do it again? It was the wrong question for the shockingly simple reason that no is an incorrect answer. And so it was actually an anchor in Bob Beeman's mind that he chose. And curiously, Bob Beeman told Bob Beeman that he could never do it again. And Bob Beeman listened, and he never did. While that one voice of his mentor told him a different thing, and he had already done it, he never did it again because of what he told himself. It seems like such a tiny thing to choose how we think. But today, our point is your future. Yeah, Bob Beeman's story is encouraging, thrilling, odd, sad, but as we've determined, it also exists as this cautionary tale. Yeah, your mind has wings, but it also possesses an anchor. And because for the most of us, the anchor is our mental default. This is why we must actively choose our perspective. And remember, you can choose how you think. So choose wings for your mind. And in doing so, you will at the same time choose your future. And it will be a future that most can only imagine. thank you guys for your time today.
Andy, thank you so much. Those little brush strokes that you talked about and the momentum, we're going to carry that into our next conversation with three amazing people who are going to give us some different perspective on cancer and how it's impacted their lives. I want to introduce you to three people that I have the privilege of knowing and whose stories have inspired and impacted me. Miguel Perez, Amber Gonzalez, and John Coffman. Welcome to Innovation Conversations and the Little Things panel. How are you guys today?
Good. Thanks, Suzanne.
Doing well.
Great. Wonderful. Well, we're going to dive right into this. And I really kind of want to take a quote from Andy's book. He says, when we're talking about perspective, he says, your perspective is yours alone. You own it. No one can change it or diminish it without your permission. You can choose how you see things. While others see a certain circumstance as the end of the road, you can decide it is only the beginning. And so I hope that maybe you can share with everybody watching today some of your perspective on cancer. Miguel, you want to start us off?
Sure. Hi, everybody. I think my perspective on cancer has changed over the years. I lost 3 siblings to cancer and other family members and friends. And when this was first happening, to me, cancer was like a monster. It was a bully that kept winning, and I couldn't do anything about it. And I didn't know how to stop it, and I didn't know how to prevent it from happening again, and I didn't know how to fix it. And I like to fix things, and it was heartbreaking, and it was soul crushing, and it took me down. And very much like Andy was talking, I think I got to this point where I was like, this is either going to take me down, I'm going to shut down and do nothing, or I have to wake up and do something. And that's what I chose to do. It woke me up after many years of just bashing me with, what I can say is like a monster or a bully that I couldn't handle. And I think now I fast forward, probably 20 years, 25 years after all of that was happening. I'm not sure that I don't still believe all those things, but my perspective now is somewhere in that if a friend of mine or someone close to me or a family member gets cancer, I'm much more at ease, and I almost see a gift. I see a gift because we know more. People are more aware, we've made more advances, and if we can prevail and we can get someone to survive, I know how thrilling life can be, and the perspective on living a different life and being full of life can be. So I'm never, I hear someone say to me, Miguel, I've been diagnosed, I have cancer. I don't panic like I used to. Now I'm like, okay, what's our action plan? And I fast forward and say, we're going to make this and we're going to live a better life. So it's really evolved for me over the last multiple years. So started as a monster and a bully, and it's ended up being a gift somehow. I don't know why.
Monster and a bully. I'm glad it's not a monster and a bully anymore. Amber, I think your perspective on cancer, I know Miguel has been a caregiver and a co-survivor and someone who's witnessed some tragedy in his life. You're not far away from that. Would you share your perspective on cancer with us?
Absolutely. So my perspective on cancer, I've come to learn that it doesn't discriminate. So it doesn't care if you're old or young, or if you're active, or how good of a person you are. For me, that really hit home when we lost my mom in 2004 to breast cancer. She was 52 years old. She was a high school teacher and turned small business owner. She actually taught teenagers how to drive for a living. So in my book, she was already a saint. And she was a competitive softball player throughout her adult years. She volunteered heavily in the community and at her church. So my naive 20-something-year-old self was like, how could this happen to her? How could she not come back from this? And the answer for me was simple, and it was that cancer doesn't discriminate. And for me, that newfound understanding really helped me to progress myself and drove me to be proactive and self-advocate with my doctors. So I shared my family history of cancer, which unfortunately is on both sides, breast cancer and others, and started requesting screenings years before a standard recommended age for someone like myself who had a mother who was diagnosed. Um, and that mentality actually allowed me to prepare for what I viewed as a foregone conclusion, maybe not being diagnosed at 37, but I certainly treated cancer as something that was inevitable. And I'll say that having that mentality led me to an early diagnosis 4 years before I would have normally been told to start having mammograms. So my perspective on cancer is frankly that it sucks, um, but it doesn't discriminate, and you can kind of pivot on that. And I'm also optimistic in the advances in treatment and research and the prospect of long survivorship with early detection. Those things have all drastically improved in the last 15 years between my mom's diagnosis and my own. And that ultimately, I think, gives my cancer story a more positive outcome.
I think longevity is something that John can certainly relate to, and that lack of discrimination. Yeah, we definitely see that. I know at Livestrong every day we meet people and talk to people, and it doesn't matter your walk of life. John, would you share your perspective on cancer with the group?
Yes, thank you, and good morning, everyone. My experience with cancer really started when I was young. When I was about 10 years old, my grandfather was diagnosed with colon cancer, and then he died just a few years after that. Colon cancer has been a part of my father's side of the family really ever since then, and I really thought that that was what I was going to get. And then in December of 1999, December 23rd, as a matter of fact, of 1999, I was diagnosed with thyroid cancer. At the time, I thought that thyroid cancer, everybody had said thyroid cancer, if you were going to get cancer, that was the one to get. It was relatively easy to cure, and the success rate was very high. Had my first operation in January 10th of 2000. And then just a few days after I got out of the hospital, the doctor's office called and they wanted me to come in for a checkup. And when I did, they told me that there was something with the biopsy that they just weren't sure about. So they had sent it off for a second opinion. They'd gotten that opinion back from MD Anderson, and it turned out that I had the rarest form of thyroid cancer there was. And so they wanted to do more surgery. So my next operation was on the 18th of January. And then we did radiation for a while, and I was pretty sick for a few months. And then in November, we did another scan. They found out that there was another spot. So we did more radiation in December of 2000. But then for the next few years, I did scans on a regular basis. And after 7 years, they said, okay, you're good. You're cancer-free. So I considered myself cancer-free until about 2015, moved back home to Austin and went to an endocrinologist who did some tests and then did a couple more tests and then called and said, I hate to tell you this isn't the kind of thing you want to hear about, but your cancer is back. They didn't know where it was. We had to do more scans and figure out where it was. And we found it, had surgery in 2015. And I'll never forget the last conversation I had with my surgeon. He said that my cancer could come back at any time, but at least they had bought me a few more years, which is kind of an interesting thing to hear. My wife made the point not to fixate on that, and she was right. And I haven't really fixated on it, but at the same time, it's one of those things that kind of motivated me so that I made the decision that do you spend the rest of your life living, or do you spend the rest of your life dying? And I decided to spend the rest of my life living. And so that's really what I've been doing. We knew because of my blood tests, we knew that they didn't get it all when we did the surgery in 2015, found more and did more surgery in 2018. Knew after that we still have more to do. So on December 2nd, I'm going back to MD Anderson and going to be scheduling my 5th surgery and probably my 4th round of radiation. But it's just one of those things that I just have to keep have to keep fighting. It was interesting when I went back to the doctor in December of last year. I told one of my doctors at MD Anderson that I had just celebrated my 20th anniversary since the initial diagnosis of this disease. And when I told her that, she rocked back in her chair and she said, "That's remarkable. You have survived 20 years with this disease." And I looked at her and I smiled and I said, "That's remarkable that you think it's remarkable that I've survived 20 years with this disease." But I have. And so I just keep going, just keep going, living every day, live. That's all you can
Yeah.
do. That's my perspective. Live the rest of my life.
You're definitely, yeah, you're definitely living. And that choice and that perspective, that Andy was really talking about, it sounds, that you've really found a way to capture that and really continue to live. One of the other things that he says in his book is, even in the toughest times, one idea can save the day. And so maybe that's perspective for John. Amber, did you have one idea or one thing that happened that's happened for you, with you, to you, that has saved the day?
Yeah, so my cancer journey is still relatively fresh for me. I think back to my initial visit with my oncologist and how overwhelming that was, which I'm sure is the case for everybody who gets diagnosed with cancer and goes in for that first visit. And at that point, that's actually when my husband and I learned how involved my treatment plan was going to be. So even as stage 1 diagnosis, I just didn't think that chemo would be part of that plan. But because my breast cancer was triple positive and hormone driven, they said there was a high likelihood that it would recur if I did not do chemo. So um, my doctor gave me an overwhelming amount of information that first day to process. And one of the biggest things was, oh my God, we're going to have to do chemo now, when I thought potentially it was just surgery and maybe radiation. And so my doctor just mentioned in passing, as one of the many things that she told me that day, that there's something called cold cap therapy. Um, it's highly effective for people who are on low dose medications for chemo, which I was going to be, and maybe it's something I wanted to look into. And that was basically the gist of what she told me. All the research was on my side. I joined a Facebook group. I kind of did some research and found out that it's a something that they've been doing in the UK for quite a while, but it was relatively new in the US. So back in 2017, 2018, when I was going through my cancer treatment, I decided that I was going to go ahead and do this cold cap therapy to try to preserve my hair. It's you rent these cold caps, you put them on dry ice. You have to have a very committed partner, which I had with my husband, who was willing to change these caps every 30 minutes for several hours before and after your chemo treatment. So from anywhere from 6 to 8 hours on chemo days, my husband was changing these cold caps using gloves with dry ice and strapping them onto my head every 30 minutes for hours. And for me, it was the right choice. I was 37, and it changed my cancer journey. It was quite painful. It added a lot of pressure to the chemo days, which are already not a lot of fun. But it allowed me to be in my sister's wedding as her matron of honor less than a year later. So I feel like I was fortunate. Not everyone has that same outcome or that same set of options, but I was able to preserve 90% of my hair, and I'm very grateful for my doctor for mentioning that as something that I should look into. So that is kind of one of those things, and it may seem trivial to some people, but keeping my hair was important because we had big things coming up the next year that I wanted to be ready for.
I think that's a little big thing.
Yep.
It is. It's a very big thing. Miguel, what about you?
I think I'm sitting in a different place because it's been, taking care of others and being connected to people who are going through this journey. And, probably when it was most intense for me was with my sister, who was diagnosed at 37. and passed away when she was 48. And it was 11 years of being by her side. And she was the oldest, and I was the youngest. We were 12 years apart. And I just could never imagine that I was going to lose her, and especially at the age of 48. And when we knew that it was coming, I mean, I was torn apart inside, and I thought my life was ending. And I was like, what are you even thinking about? This It's all about her. It has nothing to do with you. And while this was like, when I think about, like, was there a little save the day idea? I saw my sister's uneasiness, and finally one day I just looked at her and I said, I know you have a list of things that you want to get off your plate. Let me be the person. Just tell me everything. And I'm her baby brother. She didn't want to bother her kids. She didn't want to bother her husband. She didn't want to bother my parents, who had already lost 2 kids to cancer. And she and I were so close. And I know that she didn't want to put these on me, but she gave everything to me, from my niece and nephew's FAFSA forms to books that were delayed at the library. And she said, just tell them I'm dying of cancer. It's fine. They won't charge you for it. All sorts of things. But I saw the release that she had, knowing that she could share all the things that she was thinking when she knew she had a few weeks left to live. So for me, this idea of being the person, and it's not easy, but it's not about you. As a caregiver, as a co-survivor, really made the difference. And I think for friends in the future that were diagnosed and facing this kind of outcome, I became that person. And it's been something I've been very proud of doing, and I encourage anybody who's a caregiver or a co-survivor, however hard it is, just remember the comfort you can give someone by being the person.
It's a very brave thing to take on, to be that person, to return the library books or collect all the FAFSA forms, which are not easy to fill out.
I love the library thing. She's like, just tell them I'm dying of cancer. It's
just
fine.
tell them I'm dying. It's going to be fine. They'll waive the fine. They'll waive the fine. John, is there a little thing that or a little idea that saved the day for you?
I think so. And one of the things that I left out of my earlier story was that just in the last few years, my wife's sister and stepsister were both diagnosed with liver cancer and pancreatic cancer. And we recently lost her sister, and her stepsister is in the final days of her battle. And one of the things, we were at dinner with them one night, and I shared with them that something that I learned is don't fear the waves. And it's just like if you're on a beach and you walk out into the ocean and a wave crashes into you, and they can knock you around. Sometimes they can be big enough they can knock you just absolutely flat in the sand. But then the wave washes over you and you stand back up. And that happens to us. I've felt it myself. I mean, you can be having an absolutely great day, and then all of a sudden, for no reason at all, you're knocked flat. You cannot get up. But then the wave washes by, and you get back up, and you go on. And when you get it back up and go on, you cannot go on fearing the next wave. You know it's going to come. It may be emotional, it may be physical, it may be spiritual, it may be all kinds. There are all kinds of waves that come and hit us. And it doesn't matter whether you are the cancer survivor or whether you are the caregiver. We all have those waves. You can't live on. You can't live strong in fear. So don't fear the waves. Accept the fact that you are going to get hit by a wave. But it is a wave, and it will wash past you. And when it washes past, stand back up and walk on. And both of them, and Tammy's husband, said that made a difference for them. It makes a huge difference for me.
I don't know that I'm going to be able to look at waves quite the same way. John. But you're right. It's about standing back up and finding the strength to do that, that perspective to do that, and that forward momentum that Andy was, mentioning earlier. We've got about 8 minutes left or so, and before we go, I've got one last round that I'd love to ask you guys about. Today's conversations, they're all about innovation and not taking that well-beaten path, but kind of taking Emerson's advice and making your own trail. Andy notes in his book, everybody wants to make a difference, but no one is willing to be different. So with that in mind, is there a message that you would like to share with those that are on the call today, that are watching us today, that you can encourage them? How can they be different? Miguel, you want to start us off?
Sure. I often say the easiest thing to be is like everybody else. It just takes extra effort to be extraordinary and to do something different and to affect change. And I think something that's become very clear to me is that when my sister knew that we had hit the wall and we had about 3 to 4 weeks before she passed away, she was constantly surrounded by family and friends, and we were all hovering over. We wanted to be around her. She was at home, and we were in hospice care. Somehow, during that time when we know she was feeling at her physical worst, emotionally taxed and challenged, she found time to write a letter to her husband, to her daughter, to her son, and to us, the family. And the clarity and perspective that she had was astonishing. It was about celebrating and taking care of each other and reflecting on a life of hers of 48 years and the people that she had. But she made the time. I can't imagine when. Was it at 2:00 in the morning and my brother-in-law was laying next to her, probably restless? I don't know when she did it, but she made the time at that point in her life. So I just constantly think, when I would rather sit here than go out and do something, or when I'd rather just forget it, I don't need to handwrite a note, I'll just send an email or shoot a text for someone's birthday, whatever. Make the time. Make the time to do something for someone else, to lift their spirits, to lift your spirits. Make the time for yourself. You have to make the time. And the easiest thing is to not do it. So I would just say it's not a hard thing to do, but you just have to make yourself do it. So make the time. Make the damn time.
Make the time. Thank you, Miguel. I'm making the time. Amber, final words for us, for the group?
Yeah, so I have a hard time seeing myself being super different from everybody else, but I certainly feel like I'm a different Amber than I was prior to my diagnosis. In the past, I've volunteered with different organizations regularly to support breast cancer awareness, because it was a way for me to honor my mom and to support my community here in Austin. Since then, I've gone a step further and started pushing myself out of my comfort zone to share my story and encourage others to self-advocate through avenues like this session, through Livestrong, and through speeches with Coleman, as well as even doing stuff at my work through our employee resource group for women. I'm sure you've all heard the statistic about 1 in 8 women will be diagnosed with breast cancer. So if me being a different version of my 2017 self, where I openly talk about loss and my family history and early detection, encourages even one person to make their health a priority or to go get that preventative exam, then being different could make a huge impact. So little old me, I could help encourage somebody, and doing those things can bring somebody peace of mind or even save their life.
Absolutely can. I know we've seen it time and time again. That's what happens when you share your story. Thank you, Amber. John, what are your thoughts?
mine is similar to what Miguel was talking about with the letters, and only mine, in my case, my voice has kind of been my identity ever since puberty, more so even than my face. And for the last 3 surgeries, the doctors have told me that the likelihood of my losing my voice was very high. My doctor has already told me it's very high for this next surgery. So my son had the idea that I should record books for my grandkids. I've been recording books for years, and now I am recording books, not just kids' books, but books that they would like to listen to when they're teenagers. So I'm recording Old Man and the Sea and The Places You'll Go and some poetry and different things that my grandkids will be able to know what I sound like. Uh, just trying to leave them something of me.
You know, your stories have been so impactful, and I just cannot thank the three of you enough for being brave enough and vulnerable enough to come on this global stage and share your stories. And so I'm going to leave the group with this idea. You've got to make the time. You need to share your story, and you should leave a legacy. Thank you, Miguel, Amber, and John, for your stories. And thank you all for joining us. I cannot wait to hear about all of the little things that are so big that are happening in our solution sessions coming up. Coming up next are our interactive sessions. So this is our first round. We've got Kim Hauser, who is leading a session on how to Zoom. You do not want to miss that. Or Catherine Skoblik is going to join us, and she's going to teach us how to skip the drive-through. I don't know how you're going to pick, because I don't know how I'm going to pick. I'm going to have to bounce back and forth. So enjoy your next interactive session, and we look forward to seeing you soon. Thank you.